Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into the soot-streaked, muscle-aching, soul-grinding world of a Victorian factory. And trust me, you probably won't survive this. Imagine waking up before the sun even dares to rise, shivering as you pull on your scratchy second-hand clothes, then trudging through filthy, cobbled streets toward a looming brick building that rumbles like a volcano. That's where you'll spend the next 14 hours. And it smells like oil, metal, and human misery. Welcome to your new job. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you isn't the sound, though that's coming soon. It's the smell. Damp wood, coal smoke, and something almost meaty. It clings to the walls like it's been soaked in for decades. The floor is coated with grime, so thick it muffles your footsteps. You pass other workers, mostly children and teenagers, their faces grayed with fatigue, even though the day hasn't properly started. As you enter the workroom, the ceiling seems lower than it should be, as if the weight of the machines has dragged the whole building downward. The walls sweat, steam. You're guided or shoved toward your station. You'll be tending to a spinning mule today. It's a machine that stretches and twists cotton into thread. Sounds harmless, right? It's not. You'll find out why by lunch, if you get one. Everyone moves with the same jerky rhythm. It's not fear exactly, but something worse. Total submission. They know what happens if they're too slow. A foreman might bark at you, or worse, strike you with a cane. That's not illegal, by the way. Workers here have fewer rights than most modern pets. Your first task is deceptively simple. Watch the threads, make sure they don't snap, keep your fingers quick and your eyes quicker. The moment one breaks, you're expected to tie it back together faster than you can blink. The woman next to you, no older than 16, has fingers like a magician. You try to copy her motions, but your hands are already sweating. You mess up. The machine shudders, clanks. That sound, metal, disagreeing with itself, turns everyone's heads. A man in a long coat stomps over. He doesn't say a word, he just stares. Then he slams a switch off, grunts, and walks away. You just cost them 5 seconds. That might come out of your pay. That is, if you're even paid today. Docked wages for inattention are common. It's your first hour. You're shaking. The girl beside you slips a bit of bread from her pocket and chews it dry. She doesn't offer you any. She can't afford to. Historians still argue whether this constant hyper-awareness, this state of factory-induced vigilance, helped or harmed mental development in children. Some say it made them cunning and fast learners. Others say it broke their brains before they even had a chance. The room roars with life, and yet no one speaks. Communication happens through glances, tiny gestures, a nod here or there. Over the noise, speech is pointless. You could scream and no one would hear you. They probably wouldn't turn around even if they did. Here's something quirky. Workers sometimes tied bells to their shoes to keep rhythm. It wasn't for beauty. It was so a supervisor could hear if someone wasn't walking the floor. Think about that. Bells, like cows. People reduced to jingling, obedient motion. By now your back's beginning to ache. You've been hunched forward, eyes straining, trying not to blink. The light's bad. Just a few smeared windows, and flickering gas lamps. You think about asking when your next break is, but you already know. There isn't one, not until midday, and even that, if granted, is 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if your overseer's in a generous mood, or distracted. A boy 2 stations over stumbles and brushes the belt of his machine, just for a second. His sleeve snags. He screams. And it's a sound you feel in your stomach more than hear in your ears. The machine doesn't stop. It never stops. Another worker, an older man with one eye and a limp, rushes in with a wrench. Somehow they free the boy, but not before he loses part of his arm. There's no ambulance, no first aid kit, just some old cloth and a bottle of gin. Someone grunts. Get back to work. And you do. The rest of the morning blurs. You lose track of time. The only way you know you're hungry is when you suddenly realize your stomach feels hollow. That, and the light outside has shifted just enough to cast long bars of shadow through the dirty windows. Then, finally, a whistle. It's not a happy sound. It's the kind of whistle that feels like it's scolding you for wanting relief. You step back from your machine, and already your spine protests. A kid nearby, maybe 8 years old, just curls up under the table and closes his eyes for 6 minutes. You wonder how long he's been here. Probably since before you were even awake. One historical fact many forget: over 50% of the factory workforce in the early Victorian period were children under 13. That's not an exaggeration. That's policy. They were cheaper, smaller, and less likely to talk back. And you're still trying not to cry. You've made it to your first break. Barely. Your hands are cut. Your eyes feel like they've been sanded, and there are 11 hours left to go. The second the whistle fades, the roar returns. That break you just had? It's over before your brain can even register the silence. It was like someone pressing pause for a moment, then slamming play twice as hard. The machines lurch back to life, and you're already back in your station, body stiff, heart dragging behind. What gets to you next is the noise. Not just loud, not just annoying, it's relentless. Every clank, clatter, hiss and shriek of metal on metal seems to dig into your skull. You can't hear yourself think, and honestly, thinking isn't useful here. Thinking gets in the way. This noise doesn't just hurt your ears, it wears away at your nerves like water over stone. The spinning mule you're working on makes a rhythm you start to recognize. It's like a breathing monster. Draw in, snap, twist, exhale, slam, over and over, all day. Behind you, another machine ticks in an erratic stutter. Somewhere to your left is a loom that punches so violently it shakes the floorboards. Each worker becomes part of the orchestra, not in a fun way, more like a desperate attempt to stay in tune, so the conductor doesn't beat you with a rod. Fun historical fact: some factory owners claimed the noise helped workers stay awake and focused. That's like saying mosquitoes help you sleep because they make you aware of your own skin. You try stuffing scraps of lint in your ears like the older workers do. Doesn't help. It just makes everything feel muffled and echoey, like the sound is coming from inside your own chest. The machines scream anyway, and you realize there's no word for this kind of noise. It's not just loud, it's inescapable. You can't leave it. You can't shout over it. You can't even pretend it's normal. Historians still argue whether this constant wall of sound led to early hearing loss in nearly every worker, or if people simply adapted, going half-deaf and considering it part of the job. There's no consensus, but it's telling that many workers, especially older ones, would just nod in response to anything you said because they couldn't hear a single word anymore. Let's take a moment for a quirky tidbit. Workers often learn to read lips on the job, not because it was trendy, but because it was the only way to communicate across the factory floor. A kind of desperate, unspoken language formed among the machinery. By now, your head is starting to pulse. The air is hot and damp from steam, but the noise makes it feel colder, somehow. You flinch with every mechanical snap, anticipating injury, like your body's bracing out of instinct. You're starting to understand why no one looks surprised when someone faints or bleeds. They barely flinch. The building is constructed to trap sound. Thick stone walls and iron fixtures echo the racket back into the room. It's like being inside a metal drum. Someone's beating from every side. Overhead, the wooden beams creak. You wonder if they've ever collapsed. Probably. No one would talk about it. They'd just fix it up and keep going. Maybe bury the evidence under the floorboards. Another worker beside you, an older man with soot in his eyebrows and a strange permanent squint, leans forward to show you how to twist a stubborn thread faster. You don't hear him, not even close. You watch his mouth nod like you understand and do your best to copy him. He doesn't wait to see if you get it right. He just moves on. Survival in here means nobody has the time to teach you twice. There's a rumor among the kids that one of the machines is haunted. It doesn't do anything specific, just makes a different kind of screech. More like a cry than a grind. That's it. But it's enough. A few workers claim they've seen it spark for no reason, or shudder like it's alive. Superstition blooms wherever reality is too grim to face straight on. They've named it the Widowmaker. Everyone laughs, Nervously, you don't. The noise becomes something else entirely by the third hour of your shift. It's not a sound anymore, it's a pressure. It presses into your chest, settles in your spine, lives behind your eyes. Your breathing matches the pace of your machine, even when you don't mean it to. You twitch when it hisses, you jerk when it slams. You begin to anticipate its movements like it's a dance partner that hates your guts. One scholar once described the factory soundscape as a mechanical jungle, dangerous, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Another simply called it weaponized rhythm. Neither sounds particularly cozy. You try to focus on something else. Maybe count the teeth in the gear beside you. Maybe count the number of steps between machines. Anything to distract your brain from the constant pounding. But even your thoughts start to come in rhythm. Your inner voice starts speaking in time with the clatter. You're being reprogrammed. Your body might survive this day, but your brain, it's under siege. By late afternoon, you feel the vibration of the machines more than you hear them. It's in your legs, your teeth, your fingertips. You're not working near the machines. You're working with them, inside them, like a gear someone forgot to grease. There's another accident. This time it's the loom section. A girl catches her hand in the shuttle. She doesn't scream. You watch her clutch her wrist and walk straight out the door. Someone takes her place within 2 minutes. No one mentions her name again. Some factories you hear played music to mask the machine sounds. Not here. This factory believes in pure industrial honesty. If it hurts, it must be working. By the end of your shift, your ears are ringing. You think, or maybe that's just the inside of your head now. You press your fingers to your temples and feel the ache pulsing with every heartbeat. This isn't a headache. It's a complete system overload. As the evening whistle blows, you nearly cry, not from joy, but from sheer release. The machines power down slowly, like monsters crawling back into their cages. For a moment, there's silence. But the silence doesn't feel comforting. It feels wrong. It doesn't take long before you realize something's off. Not about the machinery, not even about the noise. It's the workers, the people. They're small, thin, many of them very, very young, and they move like shadows. Quick, automatic, practiced. There's no hesitation in their limbs, only repetition. These are the child laborers. You'd been warned they existed, but you weren't prepared for this many. They're everywhere, climbing under looms to clean gears while they're still moving, darting between belts to oil parts, hauling baskets twice their size. Some are as young as 6, though most look around 8 or 10. It's hard to tell through the grime. And here's the brutal truth. They're not here because they're strong or skilled. They're here because they're cheap and expendable. Child labor wasn't just common in Victorian factories. It was essential. The machinery was built with their size in mind. Adults couldn't even reach certain parts without disassembling the whole setup. But a small child? They could crawl inside, make a repair, and be out in seconds, assuming they weren't pulled in. A lot of them don't talk. They just glance at you, then look away. They've been warned not to make friends. They've learned what happens when you slow down. One little boy, his name might be Alfie, or maybe that's just what someone called him once, has a permanent limp. No one asks why. You suspect it's because he lost a toe or two to one of the bobbing windows. But he still works, still gets around. If he didn't, someone else would take his spot. Historians still argue whether families truly understood the danger they sent their kids into. Some suggest parents were misled, told the jobs were light or easy. Others say they knew and had no choice. When starvation knocks, even a deadly factory shift can sound like hope. The strange part? Some kids liked the job, or at least they liked having a job. In a twisted way, it gave them purpose. A wage, no matter how tiny, gave them power. Buying your own bread, no matter how stale, is a kind of victory when you're 9. Here's a fringe tidbit. A few factories hired children as scavengers, and no, not like raccoons. These kids would crawl under working machines to pick up fallen scraps of cotton. Why? While the machines were running. Because stopping production for safety meant lost money. And if a child got caught in the gears, well, let's just say the machine didn't stop for screaming. You spot one such child doing exactly that. He lies flat on his belly, shirtless, so it doesn't snag. He wriggles under the spinning mule, like he's done it 100 times, because he has. He flicks bits of cotton into a sack tied to his ankle, and when he comes out, face black with soot and cotton fluff in his eyelashes, he smiles. Not at you, just at himself. Job done, no injury. This time, you want to ask his name, you don't. You're learning. The supervisors keep a close eye on the kids, but not for their safety, only their productivity. One boy nearby slips and drops a spool. It bounces, then rolls under a loom. He hesitates, eyes darting. The foreman shouts. The boy freezes, then bolts after it. You hold your breath. Somehow he comes out unscathed. This time, the foreman smirks and mutters something under his breath, probably about luck running out. It's easy to assume these kids must be miserable every second. But now and then, you catch moments that contradict that idea. A quick laugh, a silly face made behind a boss's back, a secret game of how fast can you tie the thread. Their joy isn't because they're happy here. It's because they're still kids, and kids find cracks of light in the darkest places. There's no school. Not anymore, not for these children. Education costs money, time costs money. And the government isn't stepping in, not yet anyway. The first real child labor laws were still years away, and even those were often ignored. It's hard to enforce compassion when the machines are more powerful than the law. One of the boys offers you a tip. Spit on your fingers before tying knots, makes them tighter. You thank him. He shrugs. That's the closest thing to friendship you'll get today. You try the trick. It works. Across the floor, two sisters, probably 12 and 14, are working side by side. Their hands move in perfect sync. You watch them for a minute, hypnotized. They don't speak. They don't need to. They've done this dance for years. Maybe they've been in the factory longer than you've been alive. Some children work not for themselves but for sick parents. If they don't work, the whole family goes hungry. Others are orphans, employed through a system that's almost indistinguishable from slavery, apprenticeship, they call it, which sounds nice, until you realize it's just unpaid child labor with a slightly fancier name. By late afternoon, a boy collapses, not from injury, just from exhaustion. His head lolls. The foreman sees, shouts, stomps over. You brace for it, but another child, his sister maybe, steps in, lifts the boy's arm, and quietly helps him up. No punishment today. Not because of mercy, just because it's almost time to leave, and it's more work to replace him. The bell finally rings. The machinery slows. The air changes. You can hear yourself think again, and your thoughts aren't pleasant. You leave the floor with the children. Many head off alone. A few younger ones are picked up by older siblings. There's no chatter, no skipping, no songs, just slow, dragging footsteps. You were here for one day, they'll be here tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. The sun hasn't even broken the horizon when you're yanked awake by the factory bell, not your alarm clock. There isn't one. This bell doesn't offer you a chance to snooze or sip coffee. It screams one thing: get moving or get punished. There's no time to wash, barely time to lace your boots. Breakfast, if it exists, is a heel of dry bread or cold porridge scooped from the night before. You stumble out the door and into the damp grey air. The streets are full of others, just like you, half asleep, sore, shivering. A stream of bodies flows toward that same hulking brick building. No one talks. Talking wastes energy, and you'll need every ounce of it. The factory shift starts before sunrise and ends well after dark. That's not an exaggeration, it's standard. A 14 to 16-hour day was common, 6 days a week. And no, Sundays weren't always guaranteed off. Some factories used that day to catch up on essential maintenance, like wringing out what's left of your soul. There's no such thing as overtime pay. You're either there or you're fired. Tardy means the gate is locked and your pay docked, sometimes for the whole day. A few unlucky workers even lose their job on the spot. After all, there's always someone hungrier waiting outside the gate. You arrive at your post. No one welcomes you back. No one missed you. You weren't supposed to leave in the first place. The day begins exactly how it ended yesterday, with the grind of machines, the sting of sweat in your eyes, and the tight coil in your stomach that never really uncoils. You're already tired, and it's only 5:12 a.m. Historians still argue whether these extended shifts were based purely on profit, or if factory owners genuinely believed long hours instilled moral discipline. It's one of those debates where both answers are bad. Let's talk breaks, or rather the lack of them. Technically, you're allowed a short rest midday, but that break depends entirely on the overseer's mood and how smoothly production is going. One missed delivery, one machine jam, and there goes your lunch window. Poof. Vanished. Like dignity. Here's something fringe but true. In some textile mills, workers developed the ability to eat lunch while still operating machines. Picture chewing bread with one hand while the other keeps a spinning frame from unraveling. It's a sad party trick, but a necessary one. And when you do get a break, what does it look like? There's no break room, no vending machines or cozy benches. Just a section of wall where the draft is slightly less icy. You sit on the floor if there's room, next to a puddle of something suspicious. You chew silently if you brought food. If not, you watch someone else chew and pretend you're not jealous. Lunch might be bread and lard, maybe cold beans if you're lucky. Clean water? Here. There's a bucket near the wall that might be water. You see things floating in it and decide to pass. A few workers bring tea in glass bottles wrapped in socks to keep warm. The bottles crack eventually, but no one minds. A mouthful of tea and glass is still better than nothing. You'd think, maybe, just maybe, they'd shorten shifts for the kids. They don't. Children work the same hours as adults, some even longer, if they're tasked with opening the factory before dawn. And there's no rotating schedule. Every day is the same loop. Wake, work, ache, repeat. One boy, he can't be more than 10, rubs his eyes between tasks. He's been awake for 20 hours. Why? His mother is sick, and he picked up her evening shift in addition to his own. Double shifts aren't heroic. They're expected when things go wrong. And things always go wrong. A common practice in this era. Shift dodging, where one child would take on another's hours for a fee. It sounds clever until you realize it meant kids regularly worked 20-hour days and collapsed in alleys before making it home. Around mid-afternoon, your knees start to lock. You've been standing the entire time. There are no chairs. Sitting is a luxury. In fact, if you're caught resting, there's a penalty, money out of your wage. Or, in some places, lashes across the back of your legs. That's not a metaphor, it's the daily reality of discipline here. You do see one woman sit, just briefly, her back to the wall. She closes her eyes. Maybe she's praying, maybe she's just stealing a moment of stillness. A supervisor sees her and taps her on the shoulder with a baton. Not a hit, just a reminder. She nods and gets up. Her knees crack loudly. You're not allowed to leave until the bell rings again. If you do, you're considered a deserter, and that can mean blacklisting. One offense can get you barred from every other factory in town. A single walkout, and you might starve. And here's where it really gets cruel. Your entire life is shaped by this schedule. You wake when it says wake, eat when it allows, rest when it permits. Even sleep doesn't belong to you anymore. It's just the gap between shifts. Time isn't measured in hours, it's measured in whistles. The end of the day doesn't feel like relief. It feels like temporary parole. You walk home in the dark. There's no street light, just fog and soot, and your own footsteps. You've barely spoken a word all day, and your voice feels rusted shut. You try to stretch your back. Something pops in your spine that probably shouldn't have. You dream of a hot bath, but there's no such thing. You settle for a rag wipe in a freezing basin. You fall asleep still half-dressed. Boots on, grime on your skin. Tomorrow, it starts again, exactly the same. And somehow, you're already late. Hunger is a quiet companion in the factory. It doesn't shout or claw. It just sits inside you, gnawing softly, reminding you that your body is running on fumes. It shows up around the 3rd hour of your shift, sharp and clear. By the 6th hour, it dulls into a sickly ache, and by hour 10, you can barely tell if you're hungry or just empty. Victorian factory workers weren't starving in the dramatic Victorian novel way. Most weren't keeling over mid-shift from lack of food, but they were undernourished. And that's a quieter, crueler kind of suffering. It means you're never full, never strong, and never quite ready to face the demands of a day that starts before dawn and ends after dark. You glance around at the others during what passes for a meal break. Some workers have brought leftovers in tins, cold potatoes, a few chunks of bread, maybe a sliver of cheese, but many have nothing. They just sit and wait, chewing air, because chewing something feels better than chewing nothing. Another strange factory tradition. Workers often carried scraps of cloth in their pockets, not for comfort, but to stuff into sudden wounds. A quick wrap might save a limb, or at least the bleeding might slow down before someone finds a rag soaked in vinegar to dab the cut. Yes, vinegar, that was the disinfectant. Stings like betrayal. If you're lucky, you walk out of a Victorian factory with all your fingers, toes, and both eyes. But hearing loss, joint damage, and bone fractures from falls on oil-slick floors, practically standard. Some people have scars like maps. They point out the thin white line on their arm and say, loom chain. The mark on their neck? Bobbin hook. They wear their injuries like veterans, not with pride but with grim acceptance. The floors don't help. The combination of poor lighting, constant motion, and a floor smeared with oil and water makes every step feel like a risk. You trip once, just a toe catching on a gear, and for half a second your life flashes. You don't even fall, but the fear lingers, your body goes cold. And no, there's no insurance, no compensation. You get hurt, you go home. If you're lucky, they let you come back. If not, someone else fills your place. You become a ghost in the machine's memory. There's an older man, people call him Jack, or maybe that's just what they call all older workers, who's missing 3 fingers on one hand and 1 leg below the knee. He works slower now, doesn't get paid less though, because technically he's senior staff. That just means he's survived more accidents than anyone else. You begin to spot accident markers without being told. Machines that smell a bit like metal and blood. Corners of the room where the wood floor is discolored. Old stains no one talks about. Bent rails, broken screws, a nervous glance exchanged near the flywheel. They're all signs. Every worker becomes a low-level detective, always scanning for what might go wrong. The factory doesn't train you to be safe. It trains you to sense danger before it strikes. But even that isn't foolproof, because accidents don't always warn you. Sometimes it's a snapped hook flying across the room like a bullet. Sometimes it's a collapsing crate that crushes a girl's foot. One time it's a fire, started by lint buildup near a spark. You never heard screaming like that before. The fire wasn't big, but it moved fast. Singed hair, blistered hands, a few lost eyebrows. The flames were out in 10 minutes. The panic lasted much longer. And the next day, back to work. Business as usual. The smell of smoke still hangs in the air, but the machines don't care. They never do. Neither does the manager. He walks through once during the week, eyes scanning the floor. He doesn't notice the limp, the bandaged arm, the hollow stares. He just nods at the timekeeper and leaves. You start to understand why some workers walk with their arms tucked close, always, why others keep their heads low. The best way to survive a Victorian factory, don't make mistakes. But eventually, everyone does. The machines are finally quiet, but the buzzing doesn't stop. It stays in your ears, in your bones. After only a day in the factory, the noise has followed you home. When you lie down, the room seems to hum, as if the spinning mule crawled into your skull and made itself comfortable. It's not just loudness, it's the kind of sound. A relentless layering of mechanical rhythms, all clashing and echoing off stone walls. Clangs, thuds, screeches, whistles. None of them natural. None of them meant to be heard for 16 hours a day. They're functional, brutal, and without a moment of stillness. This isn't background noise. It's an environment, and it begins to do strange things to your mind. By your second hour on the floor, you'd stopped trying to talk to anyone. There's no point. The machines swallow voices. You'd have to shout just to say hello, and shouting, ironically, gets you in trouble. It's considered disruptive, rude, distracting, so you learn to nod. Point, raise your eyebrows in a factory dialect that says everything you need. Historians still argue whether Victorian industrial noise caused psychological trauma, or if workers simply developed mental defenses we no longer understand. Some say it pushed people into a kind of trance state. Others claim it trained them to tune out the world permanently. What you know for certain, it changes you. After a while, your brain starts syncing to the machines. Your thoughts develop rhythm. You don't just walk in the factory, you pace to the clatter of the belt. You don't blink randomly anymore. You time it with the press of the loom. Even your heartbeat feels off, skipping in time with a squealing cog. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a dirty window pane. You're squinting. Why? You realize you haven't heard silence all day, and now your brain's filling the gap with phantom sounds, like when you come off a roller coaster and still feel it in your stomach. Only this ride has no safety bar, a quirky phenomenon. Factory workers sometimes developed what they called machine ghosts, auditory hallucinations, phantom rattles, clicks, or voice-like echoes they heard even when alone. Some chalked it up to tired ears. Others claimed the machines were alive. You wouldn't blame them. There's one man who wears a rag in each ear, not for safety, just for sanity. He says he started doing it after he went home and couldn't sleep for 2 nights straight. Said he could still hear the looms slamming down every few seconds. Called it the knocking. Said it got louder when he closed his eyes. And then there's the nerves. You're jumpy now. Really jumpy. Every loud bang makes you flinch. A door slams at home, and you nearly spill your tea. Your shoulders live somewhere around your ears. You can't unclench. That state of hyper-awareness, once a safety response, has become your new personality. Mental fatigue sets in before physical exhaustion. The effort of staying alert, scanning gears, checking threads, anticipating jams, it builds a pressure in your chest that no nap can relieve. You make mistakes more easily, drop things, forget where you left tools, not because you're lazy, but because your brain is overloaded. It's running too many programs at once. Don't get injured. Don't break the rules. Don't fall behind. Don't show weakness. Oh, and don't forget to breathe. One boy, Freddie, maybe, breaks down during lunch, just starts shaking. Silent tears. His hands twitch like he's still working. No one comforts him. Not out of cruelty, just exhaustion. Emotional energy is a luxury nobody here can afford. And the younger children, they sometimes just space out. Not sleep, not rest, just wide-eyed disconnection. You wave in front of one girl's face and she doesn't blink. She's still tying knots with perfect rhythm, but her mind is somewhere else, maybe gone for good. Mental health isn't a concept here. There's no such thing as stress leave or overwork. If you cry, you're weak. If you panic, you're mad. If you break down, you're unreliable. There's no diagnosis, only dismissal. One fringe tidbit from the era. Certain doctors began linking factory work to a condition they called nervous collapse. The prescription, fresh air, not medicine. Just leaving. Of course, leaving meant starving, so most workers just carried on collapsing slowly. You don't sleep well. That night, your dreams are filled with machinery. Not even nightmares, just endless mundane repetition, threading spools, cranking gears, restarting stuck flywheels. You wake up feeling like you never left. You remember something Rosie told you, one of the girls who's been here for years. She said she once tried to read a book at home after a shift. Couldn't do it. Not because she was illiterate, but because her brain wouldn't slow down enough to follow a sentence. Said she stared at the same paragraph for 20 minutes, eventually gave up and just stared at the wall. The factory doesn't just break your back, it hijacks your brain, turns your thoughts into gears, your silence into smoke. Eventually, you stop noticing how loud it is. You stop noticing anything at all. The first time you really notice what everyone is wearing, it's not because anything stands out, it's because nothing does. The colors are mostly earth-toned, brown, gray, black, and the kind of off-white that suggests it used to be something else. Not one stitch is clean, and nobody seems to care. Factory clothes aren't chosen. They're inherited, patched, mended, and endured. The fabric is stiff, usually wool or coarse cotton, often soaked in sweat, oil, and whatever the factory air decides to glue to you by midday. You don't put on an outfit to go to work. You put on armor, the kind that doesn't protect so much as delay the inevitable damage. Men usually wear thick shirts, suspenders, and heavy trousers. The trousers are often too long or too short, whatever was available. Boots, if you're lucky. Clogs, if you're poorer. Bare feet. Not uncommon, especially for children. Some wrap rags around their ankles to prevent blisters, though the rags end up soaked and stiff by the end of the shift. Women wear dresses. Always dresses. Usually ill-fitting, cinched with bits of rope or twine, aprons stained from years of use. Sleeves rolled up past the elbow, not for style, but to keep them out of the gears. They tie their hair back tightly, some with ribbon, others with bits of string, wire, or even torn cloth. Anything that works. Because loose hair, that gets caught. And when that happens, no one forgets the sound. Historians still argue whether factory uniforms helped create a sense of shared identity or just erased personal dignity entirely. Workers weren't forced to wear identical clothes, but the effect was the same. The factory flattened everyone. You couldn't tell a 16-year-old from a 60-year-old by dress alone. Everyone wore their labor. And even that clothing, it had to be washed. After a 16-hour shift, by hand, in cold water, with lye soap that stung open, cuts. So if someone skips laundry day for a week, no judgment. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some factory women secretly embroidered small patterns on the insides of their collars, little flowers, stars, initials, nothing visible, just proof that something pretty still existed close to their skin, something the factory couldn't see. Your own clothes begin to feel like part of the machine. They stiffen by midday. They smell like smoke, oil, and something sour you can't name. Your skin starts to chafe where seams rub under your arms and behind your knees. The collar scratches. The fabric near your waistband digs in. There's no changing room, no place to store clothes. You arrive in what you'll wear all day, and what you'll go home in, and sleep in, if you're too tired to peel it off. You catch a girl sleeping on the floor during a break, dress bunched under her chin, her apron stained with something brown. No one bothers her. Everyone's seen worse. You begin to understand why fashion never enters the building. No frills, no decoration. Earrings are a risk. Necklaces are dangerous. Anything that dangles can get caught, and once it's caught, the machine doesn't care how much it cost or how dear it was to you. It just pulls. One boy ties his boots with twine. Another's shirt has only one sleeve. It tore 2 weeks ago, and he hasn't replaced it. Why would he? It works. And nothing here is wasted. Not buttons. Not patches. Not dignity. You try to make yourself more comfortable one day by adjusting your belt. A supervisor sees you fidgeting and snaps. What are you doing? Get your hands back to work. That's it. No room for comfort. No tolerance for self-care. There's one woman, everyone calls her Auntie, who carries a needle and thread tucked in her bodice. On rare breaks, she'll mend people's torn hems or ripped sleeves. No charge, just kindness. Her hands shake slightly from years of vibration. Still, she threads the needle in one try. Every time. Your boots, if you have them, begin to betray you by the second week. The soles start to separate. The leather stiffens, cracks, warps with wet and heat. Your feet blister. You stuff them with rags. The pain fades into background noise. A curious tradition, you notice. Some workers rub lard or suet onto their shoes to soften them, makes them slippery but flexible. The smell? Less than ideal. But no one comments. Everyone's too busy trying to keep their own toes from freezing or sweating off. By your third week, the clothes you started with are unrecognizable. The color's gone. The shape's sagged. You've sewn 3 buttons on with thread borrowed from someone else's spool. You haven't washed them properly once. But you notice something else too. The clothes around you, while tattered, tell stories. A patch on the shoulder, maybe from when the loom caught the fabric. A missing hem, torn in a mad dash to catch a falling spindle. Oil stains in perfect handprint shape. someone slipping, grabbing onto a gear for balance. These aren't outfits, they're survival records. They speak louder than any supervisor's logbook. They say, I was here, I'm still here, and I'm not done yet. It's hard not to notice how many of the workers are women. You'd think, maybe, with all the heavy machinery and long hours, a floor would be dominated by men. But here in the textile mill, women make up the bulk of the workforce, and many of them don't go home to rest after their shift. They go home to more work. For Victorian women, the factory was just one half of the day. The other half waited for them in the narrow alleys and cramped rooms of their homes. There was no such thing as clocking out when you had children to feed, floors to scrub, and water to haul, all after 14 hours of labor under roaring machines. You see it in their eyes. Not just exhaustion, but this worn-out determination, like they've made a deal with life to just keep going no matter what. Their faces are smudged with lint and oil, their dresses stained, their hands raw, yet they still hum lullabies to sleeping babies or braid their daughter's hair before dawn. Historians still argue whether factory work offered these women freedom or just a different kind of trap. For some, the income meant independence from husbands or the ability to contribute to the family's survival. For others, it was just a double burden, expected to labor like men and still maintain a spotless home. You watch one woman, Clara, maybe. She's 20-something, already hollow-eyed. Her toddler clings to her skirt as she walks toward the gate. She kisses his forehead and hands him off to a neighbor who watches 5 children at once while their mothers work. That neighbor? She's not paid. She's just too injured to work anymore. Her hands are twisted from years of spinning. Then Clara walks into the factory like she's crossing a line between worlds. And just like that, she's a worker again. Not a mother, not a wife, not a person with aches and joys. Just another pair of hands for the machine. Quirky fact, women often wore coins sewn into their hems. Not for fashion, as emergency fare to pay a midwife, a cab, or even to bribe a supervisor. The coin was their contingency plan, their pocket-sized insurance policy against a world that gave them no safety net. Once inside, female workers were assigned many of the same jobs as men, especially in textile work. They threaded, they hauled, they cleaned machinery. The assumption wasn't that women were weaker. The assumption was they'd do anything to keep their children alive, and they did. Some factories had separate sections for women, partly to prevent scandal, but more often just to maintain control. Supervisors were stricter in the women's rows, quick to accuse gossip or idleness. A laugh could be interpreted as flirtation, a pause as laziness. And yet somehow, these women formed communities. You'd see them exchanging needles, quietly passing cloth scraps, whispering baby updates. One woman crochets during her break, another knits during the walk home. Not because they have extra time, but because children still need mittens in winter, and nobody else is going to make them. There's a kind of whispered solidarity here. They look out for one another. You see it when a woman stumbles, and 2 others catch her without missing a beat. When a thread snaps, and a hand reaches over to help, no words exchanged. When someone leaves early, ill, injured, or both, they make sure her shift is quietly covered. No one asks questions. They just do. But the burden doesn't end when they leave the factory. You follow them home, not literally, but in stories. You hear about the babies who cry until midnight, the husbands who drink and don't understand why the food is cold, the endless laundry, the scrubbing, the boiling of nappies, the hauling of water in heavy pails. One woman tells you she sometimes confuses the hiss of her tea kettle with the factory steam valve. She panics, throws on her apron, and almost bolts back to work before remembering she's at home. There's no line between work and home. It's all work. It just changes location. Some women fall asleep sitting up, a child draped across their chest like a blanket. Others stitch clothing for neighbors in the few spare hours they can find, turning their homes into second factories. This time for pennies that won't be docked by an overseer. A fringe statistic, in some towns up to 80% of married women under 30 worked full-time in factories. That means entire generations raised themselves while their mothers labored, and somehow still managed to tuck them in at night. you begin to understand why so many girls in the factory never dream of marriage. Not because they don't want love, but because they see what happens after the wedding. The ring becomes a shackle, the home another workshop, the children another shift. Still, hope flickers in small places. One mother saves for a single book of fairy tales. Another teaches her daughter to read on Sunday mornings. A few pool their earnings to pay for one child to attend school. Maybe that one won't end up here. In the end, it's not just physical exhaustion these women carry. It's the weight of everyone else's survival. And still, they show up. To the machine, to the meals, to the children, to life. There's a moment right after the machines stop for the day, when the scent hits you full force. While the gears grind and the wheels spin, your nose is too overwhelmed to register any one particular smell. But once the floor stills, it's like the air takes a breath and releases something rancid. The smell of the factory is complex. You'd expect smoke, and yes, there's plenty of that coal smoke from the boilers, hanging like a damp cloak. But mixed into that is the greasy perfume of machine oil, sharp, metallic, and vaguely meaty. It clings to every surface like varnish. If you've touched anything today, and of course you have, your fingers now smell like burnt toast left in a junkyard. Then there's the sweat. Multiply your own by a few hundred. Workers sweating into wool and cotton clothes that haven't been washed in a week, maybe more. And the sweat doesn't evaporate. It ferments. Especially in summer, the smell becomes sour, thick, alive. Historians still argue whether Victorian factory odours contributed to broader public health problems, or were simply signs of already squalid conditions. What's certain is this: if you smell something odd, it probably is something odd. There's also something sweeter, strangely enough, sugar. No, not quite. It's the scent of rotting cotton. When raw fibers sit too long in damp air, they start to decompose just enough to release an earthy, almost sugary funk. It's the factory's version of decay perfume. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers chewed parsley or mint leaves, if they could get them, just to mask the smell on their breath. Not to impress anyone. No one's kissing after a 16-hour shift, but to avoid gagging on their own exhale. Then there's the stuff no one wants to name. Blood. Yes, blood. It's subtle, coppery, metallic. Sometimes it's in the air, sometimes it's in the rags. You get used to it, but never comfortable with it. There's also the urine. Kids don't always get breaks, remember? So they go where they can, behind crates, in buckets, under tables. The foremen know. They just don't care. As long as the machines don't stop. A sharp ammonia whiff in the corner of the loom section tells you someone couldn't hold it. Again, the smell of lye soap comes and goes, faint, like a ghost of cleanliness someone tried and failed to conjure. Someone might have washed their hands in a back alley basin before work. The gesture is more symbolic than effective. And every now and then, a burst of unexpected scent drifts through the grime. A splash of perfume from a worker who's saved a drop for months. The peel of an orange someone smuggled in. A peppermint lozenge sucked during a rare moment of rest. These smells are precious, disruptive. They remind you there's a world beyond these walls. But mostly, it's musk and metal, mold and meat. Even the walls smell. Lean too close and you catch years of sweat, oil, and sorrow absorbed into the bricks. The building itself exhales suffering. Your own body doesn't smell much better. You haven't had a real wash in days. And the grime builds in layers, each shift adding a new coat. Your armpits, your hair, the backs of your knees. There's a sourness that soap alone can't fix anymore. It's like the factory seeped into your pores and claimed ownership. You see someone try to wipe down after work with a bit of cloth dipped in stale water. It just moves the filth around. They sigh and give up halfway through. You don't blame them. In the corner of the spinning room, there's a scent no one can identify. Everyone knows it's there. They call it the stink. No one talks about what it might be. Dead rats, rotting food, a long-forgotten injury. The floorboards are warped in that spot, and no one dares lift them. And then, of course, there's the body smell. Not just sweat, but exhaustion. That dense musk people give off when they haven't slept enough, eaten enough, or breathed clean air in weeks. It's the scent of overworked lungs, aching joints, and bad dreams. A supervisor once brought in guests, investors, maybe. The floor was cleaned the day before, meaning someone poured sawdust on the spills and opened a window. One window, for 10 minutes. The guests wore gloves and scarves. One of them fainted, not from heat, from the air. You begin to realize that smell is a kind of language here. The reek of oil means a machine's leaking. A sharp burst of smoke means something's jammed. A whiff of blood means someone's hurt. And a sudden gust of cold, clean air, that means a door's opened. That might be the most precious scent of all. You're halfway through your second week when it really sinks in. No one complains, not about the hours, not about the heat, not about the injuries, the smells, the noise, the hunger. Even when someone slices their palm open on a gear or faints mid-shift from thirst, the most you'll hear is a grunt, maybe a muttered curse. Then they keep going, or they don't, but no one raises their voice. It's not because they don't want to, it's because they've learned not to. The silence isn't natural, it's cultivated, bred into the workplace like discipline into a dog. Over time, people here have figured out the first rule of factory survival. Don't draw attention to yourself, even if your body aches, even if your kid is missing, even if you've been coughing up soot since Tuesday, you say nothing. Historians still argue whether this silence was a symptom of fear or a learned cultural norm from poverty. Probably both. When you're punished for speaking, ignored for suffering, and replaced the moment you show weakness, your voice becomes a liability. You see it in action. A woman, probably 20, though she looks older, gets her sleeve caught, doesn't lose the arm, just a few layers of skin. She winces, bites her lip, doesn't scream. She quietly asks someone nearby for a strip of cloth. No supervisors are called, no complaint is filed. She's back at work within 5 minutes. A man's boot splits, the sole flaps like a lazy tongue. He limps for hours, doesn't ask to sit, doesn't mention the blister forming on his heel, just shifts his weight and carries on. When someone asks if he's all right, he shrugs and mutters, "Seen worse." That's the common refrain. Seen worse. It doesn't mean things are fine, it means no one will help, so why bother saying it aloud? As a boy, Tommy, maybe, who loses his voice from shouting over the machines. Literally, his throat gives out. Can't speak above a whisper for 3 days. No one notices until he stops showing up. Rumor says he's in bed with fever, or maybe his family moved, or maybe something worse, but no one checks. The culture of silence is self-enforcing. Complain, and you risk your job. Defend someone else, and you risk theirs too. Even kindness can be dangerous. If you're seen helping someone who's slacking, both of you can be punished. So people harden, learn to care quietly. Here's a fringe habit. Some workers write complaints in chalk on the underside of tables or hidden corners of walls. You spot one during your break. No dinner again. Fingers numb. Tell mother not to wait. It's scrawled in a shaky hand. The chalk is smudged, like it's been written over and over. A kind of diary no one sees. Another reads simply, "Help." It's still there, a week later. No one's erased it. But no one's answered, either. There's a man on the floor, long beard, crooked spine, who hasn't spoken in years, they say. Not since his wife died of fever and no one gave him the day off for the burial. He just showed up, did his work, never said a word again. You learn to recognize the look someone gives right before they break. It's not tears, not shouting, just a long, flat stare. Usually aimed at nothing. You see it in children more than anyone. They zone out mid-task, hands still moving automatically, eyes unfocused. They don't cry, not anymore. One quirky method of coping. Some workers hum quietly, not melodies, just vibrations in the throat. It helps mask the sound of their own thoughts. Doesn't draw attention, doesn't need permission. A small rebellion of sound. At lunch, no one gossips, no one jokes loudly. It's more like a chapel than a break room. You hear chewing, swallowing, the occasional sigh. Even laughter is subdued, like it's afraid to fully arrive. And then there's the watchers. Not official supervisors, Just workers who've internalized the rules so deeply, they now enforce them. If you speak out, they'll shush you. If you groan, they'll glare. Not because they hate you, but because they fear what your noise might cost them. There's power in silence, but it's a brittle kind, breakable, and when it breaks, it shatters. You witness one such break. A girl, probably 14, sobs quietly after a loom accident, mangles her thumb. She's trying to keep it together, wrapping it in her apron. But the tears come anyway. Her shoulders shake. No sound, just the heaving of grief. Another worker slips her a piece of bread. That's the only gesture. No one speaks. You want to say something. Anything. But the factory has already taught you the second rule of survival. Empathy makes you slow, and slow is dangerous. So you lower your eyes. You tie your thread, and the silence stretches on. You're sweeping lint under the spinning frame when you hear it. Laughter. Real, sharp, unexpected laughter. It cuts through the factory like a spark. You don't even know where it came from, but for a second, the entire atmosphere flickers. Heads turn. Even the machines seem to pause in recognition. It's gone in an instant, but the ripple it sends through the room lasts longer. Like someone dropped a pebble into a swamp, and for just a moment, you remembered what water was supposed to feel like. One boy licks the inside of a paper wrapper where a meat pie used to be. He doesn't seem ashamed. That wrapper probably smells more nutritious than what he's eaten all day. Historians still debate whether the factories themselves were to blame for food insecurity, or if they were just the cruel mirror reflecting poverty at large. In truth, it was both. Wages were so low that meals became mathematical puzzles. Spend too much and starve later. Spend too little and faint at your post. Either way, you lost. The factory didn't provide food, of course. That would imply some basic care for human life. You were expected to bring your own sustenance, however meager. If you couldn't, too bad. The machines would still demand their due. Here's something you might not expect. Some factory workers kept food hidden in their clothes. A hard biscuit in a sleeve. A lump of sugar in a boot. Not because they wanted to snack mid-shift, but because theft was common. Leave your bread unattended, and it would vanish like a whisper. Desperate stomachs made for desperate hands. Water was no comfort either. You'd think with all the labor and sweat, hydration would be a priority. Not quite. Drinking water was stored in shared buckets, warm, often dirty, and ladled with communal spoons. If you were lucky, you'd drink first. If not, you'd drink after 12 other grimy mouths had backwashed into the pail. Occasionally, someone brought cold tea. The lucky few might have weak beer. Yes, beer in small amounts. It was considered safer than water in some parts of England. At least it didn't make you sick immediately. Fringe fact: one mill experimented with setting up a canteen, a space to sell warm food, to workers. It failed within weeks. Not because of bad food, but because nobody could afford it. Warm stew doesn't mean much when your daily wage can't cover coal and bread. So, hunger lingered. You noticed it in the slow, dragging steps of the younger children, in the shaky hands of the older ones. People didn't talk about being hungry, they just tried to keep moving. Stopping meant noticing it too clearly. And let's talk about mealtime etiquette. If such a thing exists when eating on a splintered bench in the corner of a noise-saturated warehouse. People ate fast, heads down. Food was not to be admired, discussed, or shared unless you had a rare friend beside you. Most just huddled inward, chewing with grim focus like they were swallowing coins. You managed to snag a crust of bread and a bit of dried apple. It's hard as a brick, but it's calories, and your stomach says thank you even as your teeth protest. Across from you, a woman dips her bread in water to soften it. It's the only trick she knows. No butter, no jam, just moisture and hope. There's no time for digestion. The second the whistle blows, you're back on your feet. Your body groans. Your stomach gets no vote. You're part of a machine again, whether you've eaten or not. By mid-shift, hunger merges with thirst. Your throat is sandpaper. You eye the water pail, knowing it'll taste like metal and hands. But what choice do you have? You gulp it and regret it instantly. It tastes like it came from the bottom of a boiler, warm, slightly greasy, and definitely not filtered. but it's wet, and that's enough. The workers have their own silent rituals for handling hunger. One girl taps her fingers against the loom to distract her stomach. A man hums under his breath, just low enough not to draw attention. Another chews thread, just for the sensation of something in his mouth. You hear whispers about workers who fainted mid-shift. The official line, weak constitution. The truth, probably skipped dinner the night before. Probably skipped breakfast that morning. Probably skipped life's basics for too long. You think of food constantly, not luxurious meals, just warm things. Boiled eggs, a roll with butter, soup thick enough to coat a spoon. These thoughts float through your brain as you oil the gears, dodge belts and twist cotton. They are more vivid than dreams. When the end of the day finally lumbers into view, hunger hits harder. You smell bread from a street cart outside and feel tears prick your eyes. Not from emotion, from biology. Your body is desperate. It wants food like a drowning man wants air. You make it home. If you're lucky, there's broth waiting. Maybe stew, if a neighbor shared or a child found a coin in the gutter. If not, it's the hard biscuit again, dipped in weak tea. You chew slowly, you savor, you pray it stays down. You go to sleep, still hungry, but the body adjusts. Hunger becomes the background noise to your dreams, just another part of the shift you can't escape. At first you think it's just the dust that's bothering you. The tickle in your nose, the itch in your throat, the way your eyes water after 10 minutes on the floor. But no, it's more than that. You're breathing in something wrong, and it clings to every breath like fog soaked in oil. The air in a Victorian factory is less air and more flavored vapor. It's thick, warm and stale. You're inhaling cotton fibers, coal smoke, grease particles, metal shavings, and skin flakes. Yes, skin. Dead skin from hundreds of overworked bodies. It floats, invisible, all around you. Now imagine doing that for 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, for years. Let's start with the obvious, cotton dust. In textile mills, the air was so dense with it that it created a visible haze, known back then, with alarming cheeriness, as flies. These tiny bits of lint would hover in the air, settle in your nostrils, line your lungs. Workers developed something called buccinosis, also known as Monday fever. It started with wheezing and chest tightness at the beginning of the week, and often ended in chronic asthma or permanent lung damage. Historians still argue whether factory owners were aware of buccinosis early on, or whether they simply ignored the coughing fits echoing through their floors. Spoiler, they probably knew. They just didn't care. The moment you start moving in the factory, the air seems to move with you, a constant swirl of warm dampness, carrying the ghosts of every lung before yours. You cough once, then again, and someone nearby tosses you a cloth scrap. Wrap it around your face. They mouth. It barely helps, but at least it keeps the bigger chunks out. Here's a quirky detail. Some workers would chew bits of cloth soaked in vinegar, hoping the fumes would clean the air before it reached their lungs. It didn't. It just added acid-scented coughing to the mix. And we haven't even touched on the chemical exposure yet. Depending on the type of factory, you might be breathing in dyes, oils, and cleaning agents. In dye houses, workers stood over vats of arsenic-laced colorants, watching their hands stain green and red, while their lungs stained invisibly from the inside out. Coal smoke, of course, was everywhere. It powered the boilers, fueled the engines, and rolled through the windows like a sinister fog. There were no chimneys to carry it away efficiently. It just settled, heavy and black, on rafters and tongues alike. By midday, your mouth tastes like soot and copper. Your tongue feels furry. Water only makes it worse. It coats your throat with a new film, somehow more uncomfortable than before. The heat is its own problem. Machines run hot, and they throw off steam like breathing dragons. Add bodies into the mix, sweaty, exhausted bodies, and the air becomes a soup of vaporized suffering. You can't open a window because the windows are permanently sealed, blacked out or bolted shut. Management says it's for temperature control. Workers say it's to keep in the screens. Every now and then, someone vomits. Not from illness, just from breathing. They step outside if they're fast. If not, well, it becomes someone else's problem to clean. The floor becomes slick with oil and condensation. You're not just choking, you're slipping. A girl falls face first, near the loom section. Her lip splits. She's not sent home. She's sent back to work with a rag held to her mouth. The older workers have a telltale cough. It sounds like a dry engine turning over, wheezing through every exhale. You hear it during breaks, when the machines quiet down just enough. It's like a choir of broken accordions. There's another sound too, one you didn't expect, whistling noses. So many of them. From the blockage, from the irritation, from the slow daily strangling of the respiratory system. Breathing becomes a noisy act. You get used to it, or you stop noticing, or maybe you just stop breathing properly, at all. The fringe factory practice. Sprinkling water on the floor to settle the dust. This sometimes helped. Mostly, it just made the floor slippery and the air humid. You'd breathe in wet lint instead of dry. Slightly different texture, same result. You begin to fantasize about fresh air. Not even countryside air, just street air. City fog would be a blessing right now. You imagine standing in the rain, letting your lungs expand fully, but no one takes breaks outside. Once you're in, you stay in. Factory doors aren't just thresholds, they're cages. Toward evening, your chest begins to rattle. Not with emotion, with literal vibration. You realize you've been shallow breathing all day to avoid inhaling too deeply. Your ribs ache from tension. Your shoulders, pulled tight as a drum, refuse to drop. One woman you work beside, Martha, used to be able to sing. Not professionally, but joyfully. She hasn't sung in years. Her voice, once high and clear, now scratches like a rusted hinge. Ruined lungs. She says flatly, "The air stole my voice." And that's the truth of it. The air is a thief. It steals your breath, your health, your song, and your silence. You begin to dread each inhale. You survive the day. Barely. You go home, blow your nose, and what comes out is black. Not dark, not dusty. Black, like chimney soot, like tar. You wonder what's in your lungs now. What they'll find there in 10 years, if you live that long. You lie down in bed and cough for an hour. Not because you're sick, just because that's what your body does now. The factory didn't just work you today, it worked its way inside you. You wake up sore in places you didn't even know could hurt. Your forearms feel like iron bars, stiff and pulsing. Your lower back burns. Your knees crack when you stand. And your hands, your poor, trembling hands look like they've aged 30 years overnight. You've only worked a single day in the Victorian factory, and your body is already begging for mercy. Too bad. There's no such thing here. From the moment you walk through those soot-dark doors, the physical toll begins. Lifting, hauling, bending, twisting. It's a full-body workout designed not by fitness experts, but by profit-driven lunatics who think labor laws are a joke. There's no ergonomic support, no safety harnesses, and certainly no take 5 and stretch. You just keep moving, or you lose your job. The most punishing thing isn't even the heaviest tasks. It's the repetition. You perform the same motion thousands of times a day. Pull, tie, twist, lift, over and over. Your muscles don't grow stronger. They break down, slowly, painfully, silent. Historians still argue whether this kind of labor physically stunted generations of workers, or whether malnutrition was the main culprit. Likely both. What's certain is that adult workers in their 20s often looked 40. The factory didn't just burn youth, it ground it down to the bone. The injuries aren't always sudden. Sometimes they creep up like old debts. Joints swell, ankles buckle. You notice the odd twisted fingers of the older men, hands that don't close properly anymore, fingers stuck permanently curled or crooked. It's called spinner's claw in some circles. Sounds poetic, right? It's not. It's permanent damage from tying threads too quickly, too often. Quirky fact, factory girls used to wrap their hands in bits of cloth soaked in goose fat to soften the constant scraping. It worked about as well as you'd expect, which is to say not much. Your own hands, blistered already. The skin near your thumb is raw from the way you've been gripping spools. A sharp bit of metal scraped your palm earlier, but there were no bandages, so you wrapped it with lint and kept going. That's what everyone does. Feet are another battleground. You've been standing for 10 hours straight. Victorian factory floors were stone or splintery wood, and you don't get to wear comfy sneakers. Boots, if you have them, are heavy and stiff. If you don't, well, some kids work barefoot. Imagine that, barefoot, in a room filled with moving metal parts and oil puddles. Someone steps on a nail once every couple days. They limp for a bit. No one stops working. Limping just becomes part of the choreography. You meet an older woman. Her name might be Nan or Nellie. Something warm. She's got one shoulder higher than the other. Years of lifting baskets with the same arm. Her spine never recovered. She shrugs off your concern. Better than being out on the street, she says, coughing into her sleeve. But not by much. There's also the heat or the cold. Depending on the season, factories can become either ovens or ice boxes. No central heating, no air circulation. In summer, people faint. In winter, fingers go numb so fast they get caught in machinery before you realize they've even moved. Let's not forget posture. There's none. You bend, crouch, hunch, and lean. Your spine protests with every motion, but upright standing isn't an option. Machines are low to the ground or built too tall. You adjust to them, not the other way around. One of the girls near you, her name's Rosie, maybe has developed a permanent stoop at 15. Her chin never lifts above shoulder height. She's so used to keeping her eyes on her work that she rarely looks forward. That's not metaphor, that's anatomy. By mid-afternoon, your body enters a state you didn't know was possible. Not tiredness, body numbness. Your muscles stop complaining. Not because they're okay, but because they've given up. Your pain registers somewhere far away, like a distant bell you can't answer. A fringe tidbit here. In some mills, management employed walkers, not zombies, though they might as well have been. Their job, roam the floor and rouse anyone nodding off from exhaustion. If that sounds ridiculous, remember, workers often stood still for hours, hands in constant motion, fall asleep standing, totally possible, and dangerous. You consider asking for a moment to rest, but you've seen what happens to those who do. They're laughed at, scolded, sometimes slapped. You want to rest? Lie in your grave. That's a popular saying here. It's not even ironic anymore. Toward the end of the shift, you realize your jaw hurts. Why? You've been clenching it all day. Every time the machine hisses, every time a supervisor glares, your body locks up like it's bracing for impact. You try to shake it out. Doesn't work. Your bones have joined the union of pain now. There's no escape from the wear and tear. You won't get a massage. You won't get a hot bath. You might not even get a place to sit at home, just a patch of floor or a straw mattress that smells like wet rags and coal. And tomorrow, you'll wake up sore in new places. Muscles you didn't know existed will introduce themselves rudely, but you'll go back. Because the machine doesn't care how you feel. The factory doesn't care how anyone feels. Your body belongs to the shift. There's something theatrical about the factory's chain of command. You quickly learn that every movement, every mistake, and every silence is monitored by someone, often with a stick in one hand and a scowl in the other. There's no democracy here. It's a hierarchy of pain, and you're on the bottom rung. The top of the pyramid? The factory owner. But you won't see him. He's probably at his estate, sipping tea and collecting your labor like it's rent. No, the face of power you deal with is the overseer. Think of him as a less charming drill sergeant crossed with an accountant who's very into yelling. Beneath him there's a chain of sub-overseers and line supervisors. Mini-tyrants with a taste for micromanaging. They shout the most, not because they're important, but because they're terrified of losing what little power they have. Think of it as a pyramid scheme of anxiety. Historians still argue whether this managerial system came from the military model or was simply a natural evolution of industrial capitalism. Either way, the result is the same: fear, enforced downward like falling bricks. And don't get cozy with your fellow workers either. There's a strange tension between solidarity and survival. Help someone too often, and you fall behind, and you're punished. Some workers find quiet ways to help. Tying a knot for someone who's dropped their spool, slipping them a thread, but most learn to keep their heads down and their hands moving. Here's a fringe detail. Some factories used colored tokens or pins to identify workers' ranks or performance. Blue meant steady, red meant trouble. Black? You didn't want black, ever. It was the prelude to the boot. There's also the timekeeper, a joyless soul who monitors when you arrive, how long you eat, and how many seconds you dare spend in the toilet, if there is one. He has a pocket watch that feels more powerful than God. One glance from him, and your pay might shrink by a half penny. Doesn't sound like much until you realize it was your dinner. You quickly notice something else. There's a different tone used for different workers. The men get barked at, the women get hissed at, the children, they get ignored until they make a mistake, then punished like grown criminals. One boy, probably 10, gets his shirt caught in the gears. He panics. A thread snaps. His machine jams. The overseer is there within seconds. No concern, just rage. He's not angry. The boy's hurt. He's angry the machine stopped. He drags the kid by the arm, tosses him to the floor, and assigns someone else to the station. No one speaks up. Not because they don't care, but because they can't afford to. Quirky tradition. Some workers keep small good luck charms tucked in their sleeves, or boots. A carved button, a folded prayer, even a pebble from home. These aren't superstitions, they're anchors. In a place where human value is measured by output, tiny tokens remind people that they exist beyond this floor. And yet, despite the cruelty, something even darker floats beneath the surface. Acceptance. You don't fight the hierarchy because it's baked into everything, from the shape of the room to the tilt of the machines. Everything points one direction up. You work, you obey, you survive. There's a phrase that floats around the floor, better to be watched than forgotten. It means that if someone's watching you, you matter. If no one's watching, you're invisible. Forgotten workers get ignored when they're injured, or when they fall behind, or when they vanish. You overhear a conversation between two older men. One says he used to be a sub-overseer but got demoted. The other doesn't ask why. He just says better off, maybe. You sleep better when you don't hold the whip. That line sticks with you. Later in the day, a girl is caught humming, not even singing, just a tiny tune under her breath. The line supervisor snaps at her. Hard, she stops. You can still see the rhythm in her fingers, but the sound is gone. This is a place where any joy is a threat. Joy means you're distracted. Distraction means danger. Danger means lost profit. You learn to work without smiling, without speaking, without being. But still, people find ways to rebel quietly. A crooked smile, a sarcastic nod when a foreman isn't looking. Someone leaves a chalk drawing of a donkey on the factory wall, labeled "Our Fearless Leader." It disappears quickly, but the smirk it leaves behind lasts all day. At quitting time, the overseer doesn't thank you. He doesn't say goodbye. He just checks his notebook, clicks his tongue, and vanishes. The hierarchy doesn't end at the factory door though. You carry it with you. On the walk home, in your posture, in your silence, you begin to think in ranks. Who's above? Who's below? You dream in orders. You flinch when someone shouts, even in your sleep. And tomorrow, when you come back, the notebook will be waiting. Rules are everywhere in the factory, written on grimy placards nailed to the wall, shouted over the roar of machines, or passed down in whispers between older workers and the new, and none of them are made for your protection. They exist for one purpose only: discipline, by fear. You don't read the full list of rules your first day, not because you don't want to, but because they're in tiny script high on a wall stained with grease. Also, you're a little busy trying not to lose a limb, but you learn them fast. One mistake, and someone will remind you. You're not allowed to be late, not allowed to talk, not allowed to sit unless you're injured, and sometimes not even then. You can't leave your station without permission. You can't take more than one ladle of water unless someone else offers you theirs. And in no circumstances are you to touch the machinery if it's not your job, even if it's sparking. Historians still debate whether these strict codes were based on genuine safety concerns or whether they were just excuses for harsh control. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Rules make obedience easier to enforce when there are so many ways to punish you. And oh, there are punishments. If you work slowly, you might get docked half your pay. If you talk back, they might fine you the whole day's wages. If you spill oil, you might get locked in a storage room for an hour as a lesson. Or worse, sent home. And home isn't the comfort it sounds like when that also means no food. Some factories even had what's called the black bench, a stool set in the middle of the room where disobedient workers were forced to sit, visible to everyone. Shame as punishment. Public discipline, kind of like an open-plan detention center, except you're still expected to work while you're being humiliated. One fringe tradition, some factories used bells, gongs, or whistles to signal rule enforcement. 1 ring meant fall in, 2 meant pay docked, 3 meant get ready for yelling. It was Pavlovian before Pavlov even had a dog. You watch it happen. A teenage girl, Lottie, maybe, loses her grip on a bobbin. It rolls across the floor and under a loom. She hesitates, then dives for it. The overseer sees her disappear and yells. When she re-emerges, breathless, she's scolded publicly for leaving her post. Doesn't matter that she was retrieving essential equipment. Doesn't matter that she could have been crushed. Rule broken, punishment earned. Another worker gets caught whispering. Not laughing, not gossiping, just whispering instructions to a newer hire. He's fined 2 pence. That might not sound like much, until you remember that's 2 meals in worker math. The system doesn't just punish action, it punishes attitude. A tired face, disrespectful. A sigh, laziness. A second glance at a window, daydreaming. And for all of these, there's a price. Coin, shame, threat. A woman with a sore foot leans too long on her stool. A supervisor clocks it, then kicks the stool away. She doesn't fall, but the message is clear. Get up or get out. A child sneezes, and the foreman grumbles. Save it for your day off. The child nods, and does. The rules extend to your appearance too. You're expected to be tidy, though you're given no means to achieve this. Your clothes must be presentable despite being oiled, torn, and inherited from someone who probably died. Some factories ban hair ribbons too distracting. Others enforce them. Neatness counts. There's no consistency, only control. Some workers try to subvert the rules quietly. You see one man smuggle in a pencil stub and mark the wall each time someone's punished. A tally of injustice. By day's end, it looks like a zebra's walked through. You also hear whispers of sabotage. A belt accidentally misaligned. A gear left ungreased. Nothing dangerous. Just enough to cost the overseers a few minutes. Their time, stolen in revenge. You don't dare participate, but part of you cheers silently when the loom jams, and no one moves to fix it right away. There are factory watchmen too, workers appointed to report on others. Spies, basically. No one likes them, and everyone suspects everyone. It adds a layer of tension, like the floor itself is listening. One quirky coping mechanism. Workers hum songs in their heads to keep track of time. A verse per task, a chorus for cleaning. Some even use songs to remember the rules, like dark nursery rhymes. If your thread runs red, you're already dead. Creepy? Yes. Helpful? Unfortunately, also yes. You begin to fear the rules, more than the machines. The machines, at least, behave predictably. They hurt you by accident. The rules, they hurt you on purpose. You don't cry when you're punished. You don't plead. That's part of the game too. Begging earns you a reputation. Soft, they'll call you. Delicate. It means fewer chances, less mercy. So you keep your mouth shut, take your fine, and try to forget how much that pence could have meant. And still, the rules change. Sometimes, daily. One morning it's fine to wear your cap. The next, it's confiscated. 1 week the break is 10 minutes. The next, 5. No explanations, no updates. You're just expected to keep up. By the time your shift ends, you've obeyed 50 rules, broken 3, and survived the consequences of at least 1. You walk home still twitching from the adrenaline of constant judgment. You rehearse what you'll do differently tomorrow. You dream of getting it all right, but you already know. There'll be new rules tomorrow, and one of them will break you. You don't see it happen. That's the terrifying part. 1 second, the girl next to you is working calm, focused, threading cotton through the spinning mule, and the next she's screaming. The machine jerks, and her arm disappears into a tangle of gears that never stop turning. You freeze. Everyone else doesn't. Because this happens. Accidents in Victorian factories are not rare. They are not surprising. They are not even incidents. They are statistics. Expected losses. Part of the business model. The machines do not pause for screams. They don't come with safety guards or warning labels. No bright yellow caution signs here. Just whirring wheels, snapping belts, and crushing cogs that behave like wild animals if approached the wrong way. But unlike animals, they never sleep. Textile mills, in particular, are notorious for their high injury rates. Hands crushed, fingers severed, hair caught, and scalps torn. And most horrifyingly common of all, children getting pulled into narrow spaces. Adults would never fit. Their smallness, once an advantage, becomes a death sentence. Historians still argue whether the design flaws in these machines was simply a lack of knowledge, or a deliberate choice to prioritize speed over safety. Either way, workers bore the consequences. The girl is dragged back, her face pale, her arm mangled, blood streaks the floor. No one panics. No one screams in solidarity. Someone just moves to clean it up, as casually as sweeping lint. She's helped out by a friend. No first aid kit, no stretcher, just a strip of cloth, tied tight, a muttered word of comfort, and a quiet retreat into the shadows. You don't see her again. Maybe she'll come back. Maybe she won't. You return to your machine. Quirky fact: some factories kept a spare clothes basket near the doors. Not for warmth, but to replace outfits soaked in blood or oil, so customers touring the facility wouldn't see the stains. Now you're hyper-aware of your limbs. Every step, every movement near the machinery feels like it could be your last. The spinning mule hums beside you, almost smug in its indifference. You remember hearing someone call it the Widowmaker, and suddenly, it doesn't seem like a joke anymore. A boy near the loom section limps heavily. He's only got 3 toes on 1 foot. Lost them trying to unjam a shuttle. He tells the story like it's gossip about someone else. Didn't even hurt at first, he says, smiling faintly. Just warm, and then gone. You laugh too. Not because it's funny, but because if you don't, your brain might start sobbing. Then there's the belt snaps. These are terrifying. When a leather drive belt breaks, it whips across the room like a snake made of thunder. It's happened 3 times already this week. Once, it sliced a man's cheek clean open. He came back to work with stitches made from wax thread. Against all odds, there's camaraderie in this place. Strange, quiet, often unspoken, but real. When you're trapped in a system designed to chew you up, misery becomes a kind of glue. People don't bond in joy. They bond in endurance. And in a factory like this, endurance is a group sport. It starts with gestures. A shared nod when the overseer walks by. A quick hand to help rethread a tangled bobbin. Someone slipping you a strip of cloth when your knuckles crack and bleed. No thank you needed. That would draw too much attention. Over time, these become your allies. Not friends exactly. There's no time for that. But trusted presences, people whose movements you anticipate, who know when you need a sip of water, when you need a silent warning, when to shift so the foreman doesn't catch you leaning. Historians still debate whether these bonds led to the rise of labor movements, or were just emotional survival tools. Either way, the factory floor was not only a site of labor, it was a crucible of quiet loyalty. There's an unspoken code among the workers. It goes beyond the rules. It's etched into how you move, how you glance. You know not to report the girl who sneaks a second ladle of water. You shield the boy who's 2 seconds too slow. You hold the machine steady when someone coughs hard enough to bend over. You'd expect jealousy here. So many mouths to feed, so few rewards. But you see more grudging compassion than competition. One woman earns a small bonus, 3 extra pence for her efficiency. Instead of hoarding it, she buys a bit of hard candy and hands out slivers. One to the girl who lost her sister last week. One to the boy who hasn't spoken all day. One for herself. She lets it melt in her mouth like a sacred ritual. There are small rituals like that, quirky habits that survive the noise and oil. Some workers knock the wood frame 3 times before a shift begins. For luck, others whisper a line from a hymn under their breath. One man wears mismatched socks on purpose, says it confuses the machines. You're not sure he's wrong. You hear nicknames whispered. Granny Lint, for the old woman who still works the carding machine at 72. Shadow Tom, for the boy so small he can slip between belts like smoke. Gutter Rose, for the girl with the scar on her cheek, who whistles when she thinks no one's listening. None of these names are cruel, they're badges of survival. The older workers sometimes tell stories during breaks, quiet, clipped tales that double as warnings. Back when the floorboards gave way in the north wing, or there used to be a boy with one green eye and one brown, smartest hands I ever saw. Didn't duck fast enough. These aren't ghost stories. They're instruction manuals for staying alive. Sometimes someone will hum. Not a song with words, just a tune, and someone else picks it up. And for one brief, shimmering minute, the factory becomes something else, a kind of rhythm shared not just by the machines, but by the people trapped inside them. You start to join in, tentatively, quietly, a raised eyebrow here, a hand over a shoulder there. It's enough. No one asks where you're from or why you're here. They only care whether you laugh, because if you last, you're one of them. There's a strange kind of pride in that. A girl named Elsie maybe tells you a joke during a rare lull. It's not even funny. Something about a horse and a hat and a priest with dirty boots. You laugh anyway. So does she. It's too loud. The supervisor hears, glares, but doesn't punish. Maybe he heard it too, and just for a second, it reminded him he was human. One day, someone leaves a little drawing scratched into the lint on a wall. 2 eyes and a crooked smile. No one admits to it, but it stays there, grows fainter with each passing shift, until one day it's gone. Someone wipes it off, not out of meanness, just part of cleaning. Still, you miss it. There are fights. Sometimes people snap, tensions rise, but they pass quickly. There's no time to hold grudges. Anger is heavy, and no one here can afford extra weight. And then there's grief. When someone doesn't come back, there's no memorial, no official acknowledgement. But you'll see a candle lit in a nearby window, a black ribbon pinned to a sleeve, a shared glance, a slightly longer pause during the water break. That's it. That's all the morning allowed. But it's honest. So no, it's not all silence, not all fear. There's laughter here, bitten off, tucked behind lips, shared through glances. There's kindness that never makes it to words. There's loyalty no one teaches, only discovers. In the hands that don't let you fall. In the shoulders that block the overseer's view. In the half piece of bread someone slips into your pocket without saying a word. The machines may rule the floor, but down here in the lint and sweat and shared glances, there's something tougher than iron. There's each other. The factory floor never really stops. Even when it's break time, the machines hum low in the background, like beasts just napping between meals. So when you hear people talk about rest, they're not describing anything you'd recognize from a lunchroom or a sofa. Factory rest is a technicality, not a reprieve. Your first real break is sometime around midday. It isn't announced. There's no kind of jolly bell or whistle. The machinery winds down for maintenance or cooling, and that's your signal to collapse wherever you can. Some sit on baskets. Some just slide down the wall. A few curl up in the corner like cats in human clothes, already half asleep before their legs fold beneath them. But it's short, 10, 15 minutes if you're lucky. If production is running behind, you get less, or none. Historians still argue whether break times were ever enforced by law during the early Victorian period, or if they were just suggested by nervous reformers with no teeth. The answer is mostly the latter. Laws change slowly, and factory owners found endless ways around them. During your brief pause, you nibble on whatever you brought, cold potato, crusty bread, maybe a dried apple slice, if you're lucky. Some workers chew the same piece of bread the entire break, just to make it last, not for the flavor, which is non-existent, but for the act of chewing itself, something they control. Quirky fact, a few workers brought pickled onions or boiled eggs, not for lunch, but because the smell kept others at bay. A personal bubble, Victorian style, eat something pungent enough, and even the foreman would take a step back. There's no break room, no benches. You sit on the floor, the windowsill, or just lean against a cool stretch of brick. The floor is sticky, of course. Oil, water, maybe blood. You find a dry patch and call it home for 5 minutes. Some women bring needles and bits of fabric, mending their own clothes during the break. That's not leisure, that's necessity. Others just close their eyes. They don't sleep. Sleep is dangerous. Fall asleep on break, and someone might wake you with a boot to the ribs. Children sometimes nap anyway, curled up beside looms or under work tables. The older kids know how to prop them up when the break ends, nudging them awake with practiced elbows. No yelling, just survival choreography. There are no conversations about weekend plans or holiday trips. Talk is minimal. If people speak, it's about who fainted last week, who lost a finger, who's missing. Sometimes it's just quiet griping coded phrases like bad wind, meaning someone's sick, or thin broth, meaning someone's hungry. The language of fatigue. You hear someone mention a girl named Betsy. Had a sit-down break last week, one woman says. Hasn't stood up since. She doesn't laugh when she says it. It's not a joke, just reality, with a twist of dark humor. Even the act of resting is filled with tension. You don't get too comfortable. You keep one eye on the foreman. You stay close to your station. If the machine starts humming again, you better already be halfway to your post. There's a boy who doesn't get up fast enough. Not lazy, just a second too slow. The supervisor glares at him, then at you, just to remind you that you might be next. One girl brushes her hair during break. Not for vanity, for lice. If you catch it early, you might save your scalp. Another picks at her cuticles obsessively. A nervous habit or a subtle check for infection, you're not sure which. You notice her fingernails are lined with black grease that never really washes out. When the break ends, there's no signal, just the low growl of machinery reawakening, the hiss of steam, the belt snap, the floor starts vibrating again, and everyone rises in sync like puppets tugged by the same string. And just like that, your moment's over. You're working again before your body even catches up. But here's the thing, even these sad, half-hearted breaks matter. They're moments when people remember they're human. One worker doodles tiny flowers in the dust on her bench. Another taps out a rhythm with a bent spoon. For 10 minutes your soul stretches just a little. There are rumors of other factories with real tea breaks. A luxury beyond imagining. One girl claims she had a cousin who worked at a place with actual chairs in the break area. No one believes her. Chairs? Indoors? Please? Sometimes a child will ask, how long till rest? And someone will say, after the sun blinks, which means don't count on it, yet the body keeps hoping. It holds out for that 5-minute lean against the wall, that moment when you can unclench your fists, roll your shoulders, and just breathe without spinning or reaching, or dodging or tying. That's the cruel irony. Rest isn't restorative. It's just the absence of being actively broken, but still, you take it. Because for those few minutes the machine is quiet, and you remember what it feels like to hear your own thoughts again. Time doesn't behave normally inside a Victorian factory. It doesn't tick, doesn't glide, doesn't hum gently like the slow-moving hands of a pocket watch. Time here jerks, stutters, slams. It lives in the roar of the machines and the shriek of the shift whistle, and worst of all, it doesn't belong to you. When your shift starts at 5 a.m. sharp, it doesn't feel like a beginning. It feels like continuation, as if time never really stopped while you slept. As if the night was just a hiccup in the machinery's schedule. The factory clock controls everything. A massive thing, usually bolted to a central post or hung high on a soot-covered wall, surrounded by grime and dread. It doesn't mark time for your convenience. It marks obedience and fear. Historians still argue whether time discipline in factories was purely an economic innovation or a deliberate form of social control. Either way, it worked. Workers came to associate every moment of their day with punishment or permission. You wake when the bell tells you. You walk in formation, like you're marching into battle. You wait for the machines to start with your breath held, because that sound, the mechanical thunk of life resuming, is louder than any clock chime. Once the shift begins, real time disappears. You stop thinking in hours and start thinking in tasks. How many spools tied? How many buckets hauled? How many burns gone unnoticed? You look up at the clock and realize it's only 7:12 a.m. Your legs feel like you've walked to Scotland. Your hands tremble. You swear you just lived a whole day. But it's not even breakfast time. That's the factory's first trick. It stretches time. Quirky tidbit. Some workers brought pocket watches, not to keep track of the shift, but to remind themselves that time still existed outside the factory. One man wound his watch every break, not because it helped, but because it gave him a sense of rhythm. The machines hadn't eaten yet. The factory's second trick. Stealing time. When machines broke down, workers were expected to wait beside them, unmoving, unpaid. When shifts ran long, which they often did, there was no overtime pay. If you were late by 1 minute, you lost an hour's wage. If you worked an extra hour, that was just generosity, from you to the factory. Timekeeping was often the job of a man with a notebook and a severe haircut. He stood at the gate, watching as you arrived. If you ran in breathless at 5:01, he'd mark you as late. 3 marks, and you might be fired. Or worse, put on the list. No other mill would take you. There were clocks on the wall, but workers weren't allowed to check them freely. In some places, supervisors actually turned the hands forward when the owner visited, to make it look like shifts were shorter. The deception was almost elegant in its cruelty. By mid-morning, your sense of time starts to warp. You measure minutes by the number of threads you've tied, or how many times the bobbin has spun. You don't ask what time it is. You ask how much longer. You begin counting whistles. Start of shift whistle, dread. Mid-shift whistle, break, or false hope. End of day whistle. Sometimes a lie, if they need just one more delivery. Children count time by stomach growls. Adults count by bruises. Everyone counts by exhaustion. You watch a girl lose track of the rhythm. She rethreads her section too slowly, and it throws off the whole line. Not her fault, really. She's just drifted. She's brought back to attention by a shout and a sharp cuff to the head. She nods, goes back to work, doesn't cry. Time theft is a crime in the factory. Not stealing a watch, stealing their time. Leaning too long, chatting, eating outside your break window. It's not your time to waste. It's there, and yet, time leaks. Workers steal it back in tiny defiant ways. A slow breath, a shared look. One man ties and reties his boot, just to avoid moving for 60 seconds. A girl pretends to fix her ribbon while resting her aching wrist. These are rebellions no one writes down, but everyone performs. There's a story about a worker who carved hash marks into the underside of a table to track her shift. She stopped after day 3, said it made the hours feel longer. That's the final cruelty. Sometimes, knowing the time doesn't help. It just confirms how much more of it you have to survive. When the final whistle blows, it doesn't feel like release. It feels like reset. You're not done, you're just temporarily free. You leave the factory with your hands still twitching to the beat of a loom, your neck tilted like you're still scanning gears. You eat with a sense of guilt. How long until the next bell? And when you finally lie in bed, if you're lucky enough to have one, your dreams are full of clocks. But the hands spin too fast, or not at all. Sometimes the hands are made of wire. Sometimes they slice your fingers when you try to move them. You wake before your alarm, because your body already knows. It's time. You get your wages in a small paper packet, folded and smudged with fingerprints. It feels lighter than you hoped. Always does. You open it slowly, half afraid of what's not inside. A few coins tumble into your palm, coppers, mostly. Maybe a silver if the foreman didn't dock your pay. This week for loitering, when you pause to drink water. You stare at the coins like they might multiply if you just believe hard enough. They don't. Welcome to the Victorian factory paycheck, an insult wrapped in paper. Wages vary depending on your age, your gender, your job, and the mood of whoever's doing the counting. Men tend to earn the most, but even their pay barely scrapes the cost of bread, coal, and rent. Women, paid far less for the same tasks. Children, barely anything. Just enough for crumbs and the illusion of contribution. Historians still argue whether the wage gap was a reflection of skill, societal norms, or just plain economic exploitation. It was probably all three. But regardless of the why, the reality was brutal. Many workers were paid just enough to keep coming back, never enough to get ahead. You hear a boy counting out his coins beside you. 3p, 4p halfpenny, plus tuppence from Tuesday. He trails off, frowns. I think someone nicked me. But there's no recourse. If your pay is short, you don't complain. You might get laughed at, or punished, or simply ignored. It's common practice for factories to issue fines for tiny infractions. Dirty clothes, being a minute late, dropping thread, even speaking. The amount might be tuppence here, a penny there. But it adds up. You know a girl who lost half her week's pay over 4 small fines. Her crime? Inattention. She hadn't slept in 2 days. And then there are the company stores. Quirky detail. In some towns, your wages weren't just low, they were trapped. Factory owners ran their own stores and strongly encouraged workers to shop there. Prices were higher, quality was lower, and your coins often circled right back to the very people who paid you. If that sounds like a scam, congratulations, you've just discovered the early form of wage slavery. You pass one such store on your walk home. Dried beans, old potatoes, coarse bread. The shopkeeper eyes you with disinterest. You pick the smallest loaf and pay with your last silver coin. It feels like betrayal handing it back so soon. Food prices are ridiculous. A single egg might cost what you earn in an hour. Butter, forget it. Meat, a fantasy. You hear someone mention a butcher selling ox blood for stew, thicker than water. Just enough iron to trick your body into thinking it's full. Rent is worse. You live in a narrow room with your siblings and one broken window that lets in more rain than light. The landlord raised the price last month. No repairs, just higher rent because he could. There's a term you hear whispered, the poor loop. It's when your wages cover just enough to keep you alive and too little to change anything. So you work another week, and another, and another. Not for progress, just for staying afloat. Even saving is impossible. You drop a coin in a tin now and then, but it's gone the moment someone gets sick, or boots wear out, or a pot breaks. Emergencies don't care about your budget. They just walk in and take what they want. One man, you know, hides his savings under the floorboards. He's saving to emigrate. To Canada, he says. There's work and land and no overseers. But you've heard that before, from others. None of them are still around. No one knows if they made it, or just gave up and disappeared. Sometimes you get paid in tokens instead of money, coins stamped with the factory's name. They're only good at the company store, not legal tender, not tradable. Just shiny reminders that even your currency belongs to someone else. You remember hearing a boy ask, "Why do they pay us if they're just going to take it back?" His mother shushed him quickly. Too risky. The walls have ears, and even ideas can get you in trouble. Still, workers find ways to stretch what they have, sharing meals, sewing clothes from scrap, trading chores for food. You see a woman exchanging a jar of lard for a warm coat. Not because she needs it now, because she knows she'll need it in winter, and by then she won't be able to afford it. There's a quiet pride in getting by, even when the math never adds up. Somehow they always find a way to feed the children. Somehow there's always a scrap of coal to burn. Somehow there's always a coin left to buy, thread for patching the same pair of trousers again. You try not to think too far ahead. Thinking leads to hoping, and hope is expensive. So you count your coins again. They haven't changed. They won't. You tuck them away, and you whisper the same silent promise everyone here makes to themselves. Just one more week. I'll make it one more week. You hear someone coughing before you even step through the factory gates. A deep, rattling cough that sounds like it's trying to yank up the lungs themselves. It's not one person. It's 3, 4, 5. The sound echoes down the street like a grim chorus. Inside the factory, it's worse. Not louder, just closer. It comes from every corner. Dry coughs, wet coughs, coughs that shake shoulders and bend backs. They're so common no one even glances up. The soundtrack of industrial life. Victorian factories weren't just brutal on muscles, they were health traps, perfectly engineered to destroy you from the inside out. And when you got sick, no one offered help. No medicine, no nurse, just one simple rule. If you can stand, you can work. The idea of a factory doctor was more fantasy than fact. Historians still argue whether employers believed they were genuinely caring by offering occasional medical checks, or if it was all a ruse to weed out weak workers before they cost too much. Either way, the result was often the same. You're sick? Then leave, or get back to work and die quietly. There was no sick leave, no health insurance, no guarantee your job would be there after one day off. If you collapsed on the floor, you might get carried out, but if you didn't drop, you'd better not stop. And the illnesses, oh, the factory diseases, they weren't just colds. You start hearing strange terms whispered among workers: spinner's phthisis, mill fever, dust lung. These aren't scientific diagnoses, they're survival labels. Local lingo for ailments so common they didn't need official names. Uvicinosis is one of the worst. Caused by breathing in cotton dust all day, it makes your chest tighten like someone tied string around your lungs. The wheezing starts on Mondays, and sometimes eases by Friday. Sometimes, but it always returns. Deeper, heavier. Then there's the skin problems. Rashes from oil, burns from steam, fungus from damp boots, never dried, fingers blackened from dye. A girl shows you her hands. They're stained a deep purple, almost bruised looking. She smiles weakly. Better than green. Green means arsenic. Quirky tidbit: some Victorian green dyes used in textiles contained arsenic. It gave fabric a vivid glow and gave workers chemical burns, headaches, and worse. Still, people wore it and worked with it. It sold well. You spot a man with a bandage over one eye. Boiler cough, someone whispers. He worked near the steam valve. It scalded his cornea. No goggles, just bad luck. Or maybe just standard luck in here. Children fare the worst. Their bodies haven't grown strong enough to handle the environment. One boy, no older than 8, collapses twice in one day. The first time he's revived with water. The second, he's left lying on a sack of rags, while the others keep working. He doesn't come back the next day. No one says anything. The older women always seem to be limping, clutching their stomachs, or wincing when they twist. They don't mention why. Maybe they've forgotten what it feels like not to be in pain. And tuberculosis, everywhere. They don't call it that, just consumption, a polite term for slow, choking death. You watch one girl cough into a handkerchief, fold it quickly, and slip it into her sleeve. You saw the red bloom on the cloth. So did she. No one speaks of it. When a worker gets too sick to function, they often vanish. Not always to a hospital. Those are expensive and mostly for the respectable classes. More often, they go home to a shared bed, wrapped in every scrap of fabric they own, burning with fever and regret. Some recover, some don't. You hear about a woman, Nora maybe, who once stitched her own wound shut with needle and thread to avoid missing a shift. She used vinegar as disinfectant and nearly fainted 3 times. She's still working, somehow. You nod to her during break. She nods back, lips pale, sweat clinging to her brow. Some workers turn to superstition, a charm against fever, a ribbon dipped in blessed water, a pinch of salt in their shoe. Does it help? Maybe not. But it's something. And when the air is full of damp, dust, and despair, something is better than nothing. The factory itself is a breeding ground. Poor ventilation, damp walls, no sunlight. Germs don't just thrive here, they thrive on you. You're both host and victim. One man tries to stay healthy by chewing garlic between tasks. Smells terrible, but he swears it keeps the phlegm away. Another woman swears by coal dust mixed with honey. It coats the throat, she says. You try not to gag when you hear that. You notice that even laughter has changed. It's not hearty, it's raspy, cut short by coughing fits. People don't chuckle, they wheeze amusement. And yet, no one quits. Because quitting means hunger, starvation, eviction. So they work through the fever, the rash, the sore throat, the weeping eyes. You see someone working one-handed because the other is wrapped in a bloody rag. No one helps. They know better than to ask. You start coughing too. At first, it's small, dry, dismissible. By the end of the week, it's deeper. You taste something metallic when you swallow. Is it blood? Probably not. Not yet. But you know the signs now. You've heard the sounds. You've seen the handkerchiefs. And you know exactly where this road leads. You step outside after another grinding day, and the world feels off. Not quiet. There's still the clatter of carts, the chatter of street vendors, the barking of dogs. But compared to the constant roar of the factory, it might as well be a lullaby. And you notice something else. The outside world has no idea what just happened to you. The people you pass, shopkeepers, housewives, errand boys, aren't covered in soot. They're not limping or coughing up cotton dust. They're not flinching every time a cartwheel squeaks. They're just living as if the factory doesn't exist, as if people aren't losing their fingers and years behind its brick walls. It's surreal. This gap between your reality and theirs is one of the cruelest parts of factory life. The invisibility of your suffering. Outside the mill gates, no one wants to hear about what happens inside, and many don't believe, even if you tell them. Historians still argue whether the general public was truly ignorant of factory conditions, or if they simply chose not to look too closely. The answer seems to be a blend of both. There were reformers. Sure, newspapers that printed shocking accounts, politicians who toured work sites, but for the average person on the street, factory pain was just background noise. You overhear someone at a tea stall complain about the lazy poor. The man says he passed a group of workers who looked like they'd just rolled in from the gutter. He chuckles. No idea those same people were pulling 16-hour shifts, starving, injured, and still walking themselves home. You want to scream, but what would be the point? There's a quirky fact here. Some mills purposely built their gates far from the street, or surrounded their compounds with tall brick walls, not for security, but to hide what went on inside. The owners didn't want customers seeing the bruises, the soot-streaked faces, the children slumped against walls. You're starting to understand why. Respectable people don't want reality with their cotton. Even your own family might not get it. You go home to a cousin who works as a domestic servant. Hard work, yes, but clean, quiet, and with regular meals. She doesn't understand why you always seem jumpy now, why you flinch at the kettle whistle, why you stare into space when someone speaks too quickly. You can't explain that the machines still echo in your bones. The factory doesn't just hurt you, it follows you. There's no medical diagnosis for that. No name for the way your hands twitch in your sleep, or the way your ears ring even in silence. No term for the sudden rage you feel when someone complains about their sore feet after a day's shopping. And the worst part, even if someone wanted to help, they couldn't. There's no system in place, no aid for injured workers, no housing for the too sick to work. You're either functional or forgotten. That's the rule. You pass a church on your way home. There's a sign offering prayers and soup. You step inside. The soup is thin. The prayers are kind. But no one there has ever seen the inside of a carding room. When you mention it, the vicar frowns. I hear those children make a bit of noise, he says gently. But it's better than begging, isn't it? You don't answer, because begging might actually hurt less. There are rumors of factory tours, respectable people paying to walk the floor to see the machines and the workers in motion. You've never seen one, but you've heard whispers. They clean the floor for those visits, dress up the children, give the women newer aprons, hide the injured in back rooms. It's theater, a carefully managed illusion. One boy tells you about his sister who fainted during a tour. They dragged her to a side room before the visitors reached that wing. When she woke up, they told her to smile next time. But here's the haunting truth. Most people don't need a show. They already choose not to see. They see a young girl in patched clothes and assume she's poor because her parents are lazy. They see a man hunched with pain and assume he drinks. They never ask what the loom took from his spine. They never wonder how many nights he sat awake, coughing into a damp rag. The factory takes and takes, and the world outside shrugs. That indifference is heavier than your coal bucket. It makes you question whether your pain even matters. If no one sees it, no one acknowledges it, no one speaks of it, is it real? Of course it is. You know that now. You carry it in your hands, your knees, your lungs. But still, it hurts, that double punishment, suffering, and being disbelieved. You arrive home, your neighbor sees you and nods. Her son just started work at your mill. He's 7. She doesn't ask how your day was. She already knows. That's the difference. The people inside the factory understand without words. The people outside never will. One morning, before the machines fully roar to life, there's a pause, a hesitation. Not long, just enough to notice that something's different. A murmur runs through the floor. Not gossip, not fear, something rarer. Hope. Word is, someone refused to return to work after an injury. Not quietly either, they shouted it. In front of the overseer, said something like, "I'll not die for 3p a day." You don't know their name, no one does. But their story is already moving like lightning across the mill, a whisper, revolution. Could it be true? Most workers here have been taught that resistance is pointless. But now, you can feel it, frustration curling into bravery. People have begun to ask questions. What if we could speak up? What if we didn't have to take every insult, every injury, every stolen coin, without reply? It's the beginning of something. Historians still argue whether the earliest worker protests were spontaneous or carefully organized. Likely both. One brave voice often lit the fuse, but behind it there were already years of pressure. Building silently, the factory owners of course saw this coming. They watched the signs, the slow shift in posture, the narrowed eyes, the workers who suddenly started talking in corners during breaks, and they weren't about to wait and see what happened next. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some owners hired spies to work the floor disguised as laborers. They'd pretend to be friendly, ask casual questions, and report anything that smelled like unrest. One man was beaten half to death after a spy claimed he suggested forming a workers' group. His only real crime, wondering aloud if things could be better. But still, the movement grew. People started using words like petition, union, strike, dangerous words, powerful words, words that could get you fired, blacklisted, or worse, but also words that made your spine straighten a little when you said them. You meet a woman, Marianne, perhaps, who's been quietly organizing with others in the evenings, not in a pub or a meeting hall, too risky, in her kitchen. Over tea and dry biscuits, she shares pamphlets printed in secret, with titles like The Rights of the Working Poor and Justice for the Spinners. Most of them are handwritten, copied again and again by candlelight. She hands you one. You don't take it right away. Your fingers hesitate. It feels radioactive. But eventually you do, and you tuck it deep into your waistband, heart pounding. Another worker, a young man missing 2 fingers, starts teaching others to read during Sunday breaks. Words are weapons, he says. Use them better than they use theirs. You listen to him, recite phrases from new laws being whispered about. Limits on child labor, safety rules, restrictions on hours. They sound fictional, like bedtime stories for the exhausted. But maybe not. There's talk of unions forming in bigger towns. Manchester, Leeds, even whispers of one in your city, gathering courage. You don't know what a union truly is, but you know what it means. A shield, a voice, maybe even a chant. Not everyone's on board. Some are afraid. Rightfully so. They've seen what happens to troublemakers. One woman hisses, "Keep your head down. Bread's better than principles." And she's not wrong. Bread is life. But more and more, the silence is cracking. There are signs. Someone leaves chalk messages on the factory wall. "We are not mules." Another reads, "One day off. Just one." Someone smudges it out before morning. But the next day, it reappears, bolder. Quirky factory ritual. During risky times, workers who supported reform would wear a red ribbon tucked under their sleeve or boot, invisible to management. But when you spotted another ribbon during the shift, you knew you weren't alone. And then, one day, it happens. A group of girls in the loom section puts down their tools. Just for a moment. 10 seconds. Maybe less. Long enough for the foreman to see. Long enough for the machines to miss a beat. Long enough to be heard. He shouts, storms over, threatens to dock their pay, but the ripple's already moving. Another group slows down. A few men in the winding room join in. The machines stutter again. The factory trembles. It's not a strike. Not yet. But it's something. And now the overseers are sweating. You see one go running to the manager's office. And suddenly, there's a new notice posted at the door. A token of appreciation will be added for exemplary performance. A penny more. A bribe. A crack in the armor. You don't stop working. Not yet. But that night, walking home in the fog, you feel lighter. Not because the shift was easier. It wasn't. But because for the first time, you weren't just part of a machine. You were part of a movement. You hear it before you see it. A strange screech, too high-pitched to be machinery, echoing from the dying room. It starts as a sharp whistle and slides into a kind of metallic yowl, like a fox trapped in a gear. Don't worry, someone mutters, not even looking up. It's just the calendar press again. Just another day, another strange noise. You'd think, after all this time, you'd have heard it all. But factories, especially Victorian ones, are full of surprises, and not the fun kind. Sounds, smells, and even sights that don't make sense, and no one bothers explaining them. Take the press, for example. It flattens fabric between giant heated rollers. Sometimes it squeals like a banshee for no reason. No one fixes it. They just shrug and talk louder. It's part of the landscape now, like the kid who whistles while sweeping lint, or the bucket of mystery sludge in the far corner of the spinning hall. That sludge, you're not sure what's in it. It smells like spoiled milk and turpentine. Someone once dropped a tool in and never bothered fishing it out. You're pretty sure it's alive now. Every factory has these quirks, oddities that start out strange and eventually become normal. Like the cat. Yes, the cat. She lives in the rafters, scrawny, soot-colored, eyes like yellow lamps. Nobody owns her. Nobody feeds her, officially. But she always seems to have scraps. Someone must be sneaking her bits of fish or bread crusts. She never meows, just watches. Especially when someone gets hurt. Someone once said she belonged to a worker who died. She never left. They call her Mistress Grime. You don't ask why. Historians still debate whether factories allowed animals like cats to control pests, or whether they just wandered in and never left. Either way, they became part of the floor's unofficial staff. You even hear of one factory that kept a goat to clear scraps. It once ate a clerk's notebook. Productivity improved. Then there's the ceiling drip. At first you thought it was rain, but it hasn't rained in 3 days. Still, that single precise drip comes every few minutes, like a clock with bad manners. It lands in the same spot on the floor, forming a stain shaped suspiciously like Australia. No one remembers when it started. No one remembers when it stopped. Some believe it's oil. Others say it's water from a pipe that burst in 47 and was never repaired properly. A few say it's from a body buried in the walls, and no one corrects them. And the smells. Oh, the smells. There's one that hits every Tuesday afternoon. Sort of meaty, like stew gone bad. You ask someone about it, and they just say, it's Tuesday. That's it. No explanation. Just Tuesday. Another smell is sharper. Burnt rubber and peppermint. It drifts through the spinning hall without warning. One boy blames the dye vats. Another says it's old boots being boiled down for glue. Neither makes you feel better. Quirky tidbit. Some workers carry lemons or vinegar-soaked cloths in their pockets to sniff when the air gets too strange. Not because it solves the smell, but because choosing your scent, even briefly, feels like control. Then there are the phantom noises. Not machine noises, not voices, something in between. You'll hear a knocking behind the wall, or tapping beneath the floorboards. Some say it's the pipes, others say it's ghosts. A girl named Elsie swears she once heard singing near the loading docks. An old lullaby, sung low and slow, but no one else was there. She doesn't talk about it anymore. You begin to notice the shadows next. They flicker at odd angles, especially in the dye house where the lamps sway on rusted chains. You think it's your imagination. Maybe it is, or maybe it's the factory watching you, reshaping itself slightly when your back is turned. One of the older men jokes that the building is alive, not haunted, just sentient. It eats years and spits out bones. He laughs when he says it, but the laugh turns into a cough that rattles the rafters. Still, some of the strangeness is intentional, like the whistle tones. You realize one day that there are different pitches for different commands. One sharp blast means return, too short means stop production. A long slow trill, emergency, and a few tones are deliberately confusing, meant to make sure only trained ears respond. You test this by reacting to one you don't understand. A supervisor clocks your hesitation and snaps. That wasn't for you. You never make that mistake again. Some noises aren't even mechanical. There's a man who whistles while he works. Always the same tune. Over and over. You ask what it is. He shrugs. I forgot. Just stuck with me. You find yourself humming it in your sleep. It gets into your head like lint in your lungs. Then one day, he's gone. But you're still whistling. The factory is like that. Full of things that linger long after they've gone. Smells, sounds, shadows, even feelings. A woman in the corner weaves for hours without looking up. No one speaks to her. She's always worked there, someone says. You ask her name. They shake their heads. We call her the clock. Why? She never stops. And she doesn't. You begin to understand that in this world of constant repetition and noise, strangeness is comfort. The weird, the unexplained, the slightly spooky, those are the things that remind you you're not entirely machinery, that there's still mystery in this place, that not everything can be ground down. So the next time the die press screams like a banshee or the ceiling drip taps your shoulder like a ghost with bad aim, you don't flinch. You just say, that's the factory. And you keep going. You start to wonder what day it is. Not just what day of the week, but the actual date. The calendar date. You haven't looked at one in over a week, and you're pretty sure you've missed a Sunday. Maybe two, maybe more. The days blur together in the same grey swirl of work, sleep, pain and noise. You try to ask someone, is it Thursday? They shrug. Could be. You realize then, time has dissolved. All you have are shifts. Machines, meals, whistles. This is what the end of the week looks like. Not freedom, not rest. Just a long, hollow stare toward the next week, wondering how many more your body can take before it folds. Your hands are blistered. Again, your shoulder aches from repetitive lifting, and your feet are swollen inside your boots. You've memorized every squeal your machine makes, every hiccup in the spinning frame's rhythm. You react before it happens. You're part machine now, whether you like it or not. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll of industrial labor was more damaging than the physical. But when you live it, you see they're two sides of the same hammer. You feel yourself dulling. Less pain, more numbness. Less fear, more automatic obedience. That's when it hits you. The factory doesn't just break people, it reshapes them, like iron in a forge. Burn, bend, repeat. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a broken window pane. Your face is thinner, eyes heavier. There's cotton fluff in your eyebrows. You're smiling, not because you're happy, just because it's easier than frowning now. Someone behind you sneezes twice. No one reacts. If it's illness, fine. If it's dust, also fine. There's no energy left for curiosity, only function. Even your dreams betray you. You used to dream of running through open fields or eating hot bread or sleeping on a feather pillow. Now you dream of thread tension, of winding bobbins, of accidentally missing a bell. You wake with your hands twitching, reaching for tools that aren't there. You hear of someone who walked into the river last week, just kept walking until the water closed over their head. No note, just exhaustion. Someone says, maybe she thought she was still on the clock. No one laughs. Quirky factory behavior. Some workers mark the days on their skin, small ink dots or tiny cuts near the wrist, just to keep track of time. Not because it helps, but because they want proof they lived it. Others keep a journal, but not of thoughts of production. Tied 4112 spools. Didn't get shouted at, cough worse. Boots held up. A biography written in scraps of data. You walk home through alleys soaked in smoke and horse droppings, past windows lit with yellow lamplight. The contrast is jarring. Somewhere someone is eating dinner off clean plates, talking, laughing. You turn into your shared room and collapse onto the straw mattress. A rat skitters by. You don't care. You close your eyes, and your body buzzes. Not with thought, not with hope, just vibration from 1,000 repeated motions. And you still have one more shift before your half-day rest. It's not guaranteed. If there's backlog, you'll work through it. The foreman decides. You haven't made plans for your day off, because you can't believe it'll happen. But even the hope of a shorter shift is enough to lift the air a little. You see it in others too. A touch more breath in the lungs, a longer blink, a moment stolen for no reason at all. You try to think beyond the factory. What would you do with free time? Sleep, maybe. Clean yourself. See your mother. Take a walk. Not for errands. For nothing. For air. But even imagining it feels strange. Like stretching muscles that haven't moved in weeks. Someone near you jokes, "I'm gonna get so much nothing done tomorrow." The line rolls around the group like a warm wave. A few chuckles. Someone sighs. It's the most hope you've heard all week. The end of a work week in the factory isn't triumphant. It's survival. You don't raise your fists. You don't cheer. You just keep breathing. Keep counting. Keep not quitting. There's no payday celebration. No singing in the streets. You take your crumpled coins, your cracked hands, and your phantom limb aches and tuck them all into your coat pockets. You walk through the door without a word. But there's one small mercy. When the bell rings tomorrow, if it rings at all, you might not have to answer it. And in a place like this, that counts as a miracle. You wake up before the bell, not because you want to, because your body has learned to anticipate it. Like a soldier trained to flinch at the first hint of gunfire. You lie still, staring at the ceiling beam above your cot, waiting. But the bell doesn't come. For a minute, you panic. Did you oversleep? Is your pay docked? Are you already in trouble? Then it hits you. Today is Sunday. A real one. No surprise shift. No emergency hours. No fake maintenance schedule. For the first time in how long? Days? Weeks? You've been granted a full day off, and you almost don't know what to do with it. There's no rush to get dressed. No frantic shoe tying while chewing hard bread. You sit on the edge of your cot and feel your body, truly feel it. It hurts in ways you stopped naming a long time ago. But there's no whistle to force you upright. You go outside. The street is quieter. Not silent, but different. Softer. Less desperate. Children chalk hopscotch lines on cobblestones. Old women hang laundry with red raw hands. The air is still filthy. Still thick with smoke and soot. But there's no roar of machines. No pressure. No orders. It's strange how much you notice when you're not being shouted at. You see the factory building in daylight. Really see it. It looms. Yes, but it's just a building. Bricks and windows. The monster only wakes when people fill it. Historians still argue whether Sundays off were a product of religious morality, worker resistance, or simply a way to keep employees alive long enough to return Monday. Either way, the factories complied. Sort of. And only sometimes. You go to church, not for faith, necessarily, but because it's quiet. You sit in the back, let the hymns wash over you. The words don't matter. The sound is soft and human. No gears, no belt. A woman beside you knits during the sermon. A man dozes with his hat over his face. No one scolds them. Everyone's too tired to be righteous. Afterward, you share bread with someone who worked beside you last week. You don't talk about the factory, you just sit. In the sun. Together. That's all. It feels like rebellion. Back home, you wash. Not just a face splash, but a real scrub. Cold water, lye soap, stiff bristles. Your skin stings, but it's worth it. Layers of factory dust swirl down the drain like a small exorcism. You mend your clothes, stitch a seam, patch a sock. You could rest more, but you want something to show for the day besides silence. Quirky tradition. Some workers saved their best clothes, often barely different from their worst, for Sundays. Not for style, but for dignity. Proof they were more than what Monday through Saturday allowed. You visit your brother's grave. He died last year. Steam scalding. A quick death, they said. Clean. The foreman marked his absence for half a shift, then forgot. You haven't. You sit beside the stone, fingers in the grass. It's the only place that doesn't smell like oil. You tell him you're still working, still hurting, still here. As the sun sets, you walk home slowly. Not because you're tired, because you don't want the day to end. Not yet. But Monday is coming. You feel it breathing on the back of your neck. Word count. Wind down 300 words. So now, as we step back from the clatter and smoke, let your breath slow. Let the weight of the machine slip from your shoulders. You've done enough. More than enough. The factory fades behind you. Brick by brick. Bell by bell. It doesn't disappear. It never will. But it quiets. Grows smaller. You did something nearly impossible tonight. You walked through the smoke and survived the silence. You saw the children with kohl-ringed eyes, the women who never stopped moving, the boys with bent fingers and brave faces. You didn't look away. And now, you can finally rest. Let the gears stop turning. Let your hands uncurl. Your breath can be soft again. Your heartbeat your own. The factory belongs to the past, and you are not a cog. Not anymore. You are safe. No whistles. No docked pay. No overseers watching from the shadows. Just the soft hum of your own space. Your own breath. Maybe a blanket pulled a little tighter. A fan whispering overhead. A nightlight glowing warm in the corner. Let sleep come like a fog. Gentle and slow. Let your body feel what it's like, not to brace against another day. You're not in the factory anymore. You're free. Good night.